This is the Honor Magic V2. It's one of the thinnest folding phones ever made to date. In fact, even in its folded form, it's less than 1mm thicker than the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But unfolded is a completely different story. What makes this foldable phone one of the best out there, in my opinion, is the fact that the cover screen isn't narrow or passport sized. It's a proper 6.43-inch display. And the unfolded screen is huge at 7.92 inches. And most importantly, there is no unsightly crease. Well, at least not one that's very noticeable. There really is nothing worse than an unsightly crease. So the Honor Magic V2 is perfect, but there are some things that you need to know about. But before we do that, let's run through some of the basic info that you need to know. There are 3 models available: the black, which is the one I have here with the kind of leather back on it, the purple, and the Porsche edition.
Hey, it's Porsche!
My apologies, the Porsche limited edition. That one looks pretty slick. In terms of memory, the RAM is locked in at 16 gigabytes on all models, and the 512GB ROM is the version that we have here in Europe. If you look around online, there are different variants of this around the world, and actually a few more colors. The processor is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 from Qualcomm, which is a top tier flagship. And for context, here's how it performed at around 50% battery in the performance mode on Geekbench. The CPU single core score is just above the Galaxy S23 Ultra, and the CPU multi-core score follows suit. When it comes to graphics, the GPU score is also impressive, with it placing in line with the Galaxy S23 Plus on Geekbench 6. So if you feel the need for speed, the Honor Magic V2 will not disappoint. And what's the point of having all that speed if you don't have the power to match? The Magic V2 has the power with a 5000 mAh battery. This is one of the largest ever in a folding phone, and it supports 66 watt supercharging speeds. And the battery life for me has been solid during my testing of this device. Of course, there are variables to keep in mind. For example, if you enable the performance mode, the battery drops around an hour. And if you use the unfolded display frequently, that could also impact the battery. And just to give you an example of what you could expect with this phone, here's my screen on time today with 4.5 hours screen on, and I've still got 57%, and it's nearly 6 p.m. in the evening. I expect to finish this day probably with around 30% battery left, unless I'm going to use that open display to binge watch something on Netflix or Crunchyroll or something. And I've actually found day to day, whilst I'm walking around with this phone and I'm out and about in the streets, I usually just use the cover display because it's the perfect size. It's just like a regular phone. But when I'm indoors and I'm sitting down all comfortable and I want to watch something on the phone, that's when I use the unfolded display. So actually, I would say I'm probably using the cover display more than I am the inner display. But if I was commuting a lot, I'd definitely use that inner display a bit more. But that's the beauty of this phone. You're not really compromising if you do decide to use the cover display. And since we're on the topic, let's talk about those displays. Both support 120 Hz. The cover screen is 2376 by 1060, but a notable difference here between the cover screen and the inner screen, the peak brightness here is 2500 nits, and it is an LTPO display, and this means it can slow all the way down to just 1 Hz refresh rate when the screen is idle, and it can ramp all the way up to 120 Hz when needed. And this is one of the features that helps it save power. It's sharp, it's fast, it's bright, and those are 3 words never used to describe me. Now, before I dive into the full display, there's a couple of things I want to show you first. There is an infrared blaster up top, stereo speakers, which sound really nice, a side-mounted fingerprint sensor, and a dual SIM tray. And if you're wondering about the USB-C port, it's a USB-C 3.1. But check this out, the hinge is titanium, which seems to be in fashion when it comes to 2024 flagships, and this hinge is one of the thinnest out there right now. So I've played around with this quite a bit, and I've kind of figured out that it stays sturdy up until about 110 degrees, all the way to the closed position. Past 110 degrees when opening, it's got a spring action that kind of snaps it open, and it's really quite satisfying. Now let's talk about that opened IMAX experience that you get with this. I'm not sure if it's IMAX ratio, but you get the idea. It's also 120 Hz LTPO, 7.92 inches, 2344 by 2156. It's also 402 pixels per inch, 1600 nits of peak brightness, and I find it to be a little less of a smudge magnet than some other foldables I've used in the past. And something else you should know about this is it does support a stylus. So it's truly impressive. And there's some really nice eye comfort features here too, such as the circadian night display, which reduces the blue light gradually. And it's got PWM dimming that reduces flicker that can fatigue your eyes without you realizing it. Now let's talk about the cameras. If you are a cameraman, you're gonna love this.
I am the cameraman.
The camera module has one huge piece of glass over all three of the shooters with a little bit of a gold trim, which adds a nice little bit of bling to the device. The primary camera is a 50 megapixel f1.9 with optical image stabilization. The ultra wide is a 50 megapixel f2 and the telephoto is a 20 megapixel f2.4, also with optical image stabilization. And all the shooters here deliver respectable results. And in regards to video, the primary video quality goes all the way up to 4K 60. And because this is a folding phone, of course it has two selfie cameras, one on the cover screen and one on the inner screen. And let's not forget, you can use the primary camera as a selfie as well with the cover screen as your viewfinder. And when you are taking photos like this, you can use the volume rocker up in order to snap a photo. And because both in-display selfie cameras seem to have the same specs, that leads me to believe that they use the same sensors and same optics, but I'm not sure. So here's a side-by-side camera comparison for you guys. Let me know if you can spot a difference and whether you think Honor uses the beauty mode by default. Okay, seriously now, these are actually the selfie cameras. Let me know what you think. So hopefully at this point in the video, you've realized how OP, overpowered and stacked this phone is in regards to its specs. And you might be thinking, what was that catch that I mentioned in the intro of the video? Well, let's start with the price. This is gonna set you back a bag of sand, a monkey, and 2 tons. In the Queen's English, that's £1,700. But the good news here is there is a promo running at the time of this video, and I've got a discount code for you guys. And if you use it, you're gonna get a free pair of Bang & Olufsen headphones worth £459 and screen protection for the device. And you'll also get a £200 subscriber voucher. And that is an amazing deal if you're thinking about picking up this phone. It's only running until the 1st of March and I'm not getting paid for it. I'm not getting any commission or anything like that. It's genuinely a good deal. That's why I'm letting you know about it. Anyway, here's a couple of other caveats that you need to know about this phone. I fully expected there to be a charger in the box with this phone, but unfortunately, there wasn't. And I did expect to see it in the box because on the Chinese version of this phone, it was there. But there is some good news. They do provide a really nice case for the device, which actually has a kickstand built in and a little flap here to protect that titanium hinge and prevent dust getting in there between the cracks. So I've been testing phones for a while, and along the way, I've discovered a few things that I find useful on different operating systems and different versions of the Android interface. So with that in mind, here's a few features that I wish the Honor V2 would have. So right now, when you choose a custom background like this Wolverine one that I have here, you can theme the system icons and user interface around the color scheme on that background, but you can't do it manually, which I find a little bit frustrating. And also you can customize the icons a little bit, but there really isn't as many options as I've seen elsewhere. So hopefully Honor improved this later on with a update or something. Also, whilst you can stack Honor's stock Magic OS cards, which are essentially widgets, you can't stack the classic widgets, which is basically a widget from any other app you might install on the device. So it would be nice if they would allow that in the future. Now you might be thinking these things are a deal breaker, right?
Wrong.
One of the best things about being an Android user is the flexibility and freedom that you get. And at any moment, if you really want to, you can customize the entire UI experience in minutes. And if you're wondering how is this possible, well, check out the thumbnail on screen right now. They are the top launchers that you can download on the Play Store right now that all work on Android 14. And there's some really interesting ones I think you should see. And on that note, let me show you guys a little bit of magic.